Shalom, everybody. Looking forward to a great day today. And I want to share with you, now we're going to go on to the 7th and 8th principles of the 13 principles of faith. We're going to do a double header today, Thursday, at the end of the week, and give you enough food for thought to last you throughout Shabbos and the rest of the weekend till we get back together again. In the meantime, the 7th principle is the belief in the primacy of the prophecy of Moses, our teacher. That's the 7th principle of our faith. And the 8th is the belief in the divine origin of the Torah. And in a certain way, both are very, very close and intertwined together. Let's start off with the Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, our Rebbe, was the teacher of so much. He knew and transmitted the secrets of the Torah. We believe that it was not just the written Torah that he transmitted, but when he was up on Mount Sinai for 120 days, he was literally the recipient of deep, deep secrets about the universe, about the Torah, about understanding every single letter of the Torah, every note of the Torah, every message God wanted to be transmitted. So at the time of the Ten Commandments, which was at the beginning of the 120 days, it wasn't just a matter of Moses bringing down the 10 tablets. He brought down all of the transmission of knowledge that God wanted as far as this covenant that he had with the Jewish people. It was being created at that spot, at Mount Sinai. The covenant was signed, sealed, and delivered. And Moses really brought down the inner aspects of the Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah, and so many of the things that we do today are dependent on that event. And even those things that are part of the oral tradition, many of them are what we call halacha l'Moshe Missinai. They are laws that were given to Moses and Mount Sinai that we accept as being law. Let's say, for instance, how tefillin are made. In the written Torah, it only says, that you should bind them for a sign upon your hands or frontlets between your eyes. But how to do that is a mystery. But we have from Moshe, literally the specifics, over 30 special laws of how God told him, what does that sentence mean? And so forth and so on for so many of the sentences in the Torah. What does this mean? What does that mean? And Moses asked God, give an explanation. What is this all about? Well, I don't know if he asked him, but I know that he eventually received all of that explanation necessary in order to understand what is this written Torah all about. That's why we say, for instance, interesting enough, that the written Torah is really the possession of all the nations of the world, of all civilizations, because that was something given by God to humanity. It's the oral tradition that Moses received on Mount Sinai that really is, so to say, the unique Jewish key to understand what our Jewish role is. How do we as Jews interpret and understand what the Torah says and what it means in order to be able to apply that covenant as best as we can as a Jewish people? So Moses was a person we knew very little about. Unlike, let's say, Joseph, who we know a tremendous amount, because there are so many stories about Joseph and how he reacted and he cried and how he dealt with situations and so forth and so on. But Moses was a whole different story. Moses was just the ultimate bittul, the ultimate self-negation before God. He nullified himself before God to become that conduit that we spoke about yesterday. And he was able to be a recipient for really the essence of God coming in and speaking through him. Said that the divine presence spoke through the throat of Moshe. My throat is not doing so well these days, but Moshe Rabbeinu's throat was really a conduit for God's talking. And that's a pretty amazing thing. It says that God spoke face to face with Moses. That Moses was trusted in God's inner house, it says in Deuteronomy. That he was a person who was the greatest of all the prophets because there was nothing hidden, so to say. He himself went and appealed to God when the Jewish people were doing things they shouldn't be doing, like building a golden calf or rebelling or other such types of activities. He's the one who appealed to God to ask for forgiveness, and he got it. And he's the one who argued with God about the fact that God wanted, after they built a golden calf, to destroy the Jewish people. And he said, hey, God, how can you do that? You know what's going to happen? All the nations around us are going to say that it's not because the Jews weren't behaving, it's because God knew that he couldn't defeat 31 kings in the land of Canaan. So as a result, one king, one pharaoh over in Egypt was easy, but 31 kings in the land of Canaan was too hard. So he blamed it on the Jews and he destroyed them in the desert, knowing that he couldn't make it in time. He came to God with this explanation of why he shouldn't destroy the Jewish people, and he won. So the arguments that he had with God are a whole different subject of its own. It's not so simple and not as it appears on the surface. But the main idea is that Moses was a person who was this pure conduit to be able to transmit that knowledge without any personal motivation or interest or whatever it might be. He, Aaron said, "Nachnu ma." When the Jewish people came to them to complain about the food that they were getting, the manna, which I'm sure none of us would complain at all if we got the manna, at least not for the first 39 years, maybe the 40th year, but they were complaining. So what happened? Moses said to them, "B'nachnu ma, what are we? Why are you coming to us? We're just messengers of God. We are conduits for what God did. We're not trying, we have no agenda over here." That's why, for instance, Korach, when he rebelled against Moshe, he was barking up the wrong tree. Because it's not like Moshe was speaking for himself or doing things on his own, or he had an ego trip out of this. And as a result, we know what happened to Korach in the Torah. Because Moshe was holy. He was a person who was through and through the real thing, a pnimi, an atzmi, a person who embodied everything about God. And as a result was able to carry that tremendous load of bringing the Torah to the Jewish people and giving it over during the 40 years that he was in the desert. So now going to the next belief in the divine origin of the Torah, which of course is very much tied up with Moshe, because Moshe was the one who presented us with the Ten Commandments on the 2 tablets. He's the one who presented us with the written tradition. He's the one who wrote down during the course of the 40 years, 8 different times, all of the details of the 5 books of Moses that we have today, including the oral tradition, which is the vowels, and the tagim, which are those little crowns on the top of 7 of the letters, and even the trope, even the tunes that we use in the Torah. So these are all things that we got from Moshe. So much of Judaism is really Moshe and what Moshe gave us as far as the oral tradition. So this divine origin, of course, is a very touchy topic, which I think we'll continue with next week as well. But I want to give you some food for thought for now. If we say that, as many people claim, listen, the Torah, it was handed down, it's already 3,300 years old, who knows how many changes it went through, who knows what was said, and how do we know it's the original Torah, and so forth and so on. Well, we'll go into other proofs perhaps next time. But I want to share with you one thought. In order to make a claim that the Torah that we have was man-made, or written by Moshe, or written by somebody else, written by a very wise person. So you would basically have to say that all the people in the desert, or let's say any generation, everybody decided that they were going to conspire against their children. They were all going to agree to one Baba Maisa, and they were going to present that Baba Maisa. Baba Maisa, for those who don't know, it's like a real wild claim. They're all going to present that Baba Maisa to a whole generation of their children and state that this is what happened on Mount Sinai many years ago. Now, the possibility of that happening, and even if somebody would decide that this is what they're going to do, the possibility of them being successful is highly unlikely. And part of the uniqueness of Judaism is that we're the only people in the world who make a claim that God spoke to 3 million of us. All other religions of the world claim that this person had a personal experience with God and therefore transmitted what God told them. Another religion says another person transmitted. We're not dependent just on Moses being the recipient of that transmission. 3 million people stood on Mount Sinai and heard the first 2 of the 10 Commandments. experienced what they experienced and transmitted from generation to generation, telling everybody after them, their children, and so forth and so on, what they experienced. So the chances of somebody coming up with this and just creating this from their imagination or from some other tradition, or 4 different writers chipping in to make this Torah what it is, realistically, historically, it just doesn't fly, because we have a tradition that goes back from parent to child, teacher to student, generation to generation. If you look in the beginning of Maimonides in Mishnah Torah, his introduction there, he shows every generation, the leader of each generation by name, going all the way back to Moses, and what their responsibilities were, and how they transmitted the Torah from Moses' time, Moshe Rabbeinu's time, till the present when Maimonides lived. And of course, from Maimonides' time till now, for sure, we can trace in Jewish history the different generations. So as much as there might be an attempt to undermine the divine origin of the Torah, it really doesn't hold water. You're talking about 5 different authors. Listen, God could be 100, 1,000 different authors. He can have as many different writing styles as he wants. He's God. So, it makes no sense on that basis to all of a sudden try to say that this Torah that we have is not divine. To the contrary, we should celebrate it. We should be happy. We should feel honored. We should feel that we have a special gift that's been transmitted literally for over 3,300 years. That's this treasure that's in our house. And that we have an ability to be able to tap into it and be able to know a little bit of God's plan for this world and what God wants from us individually. So we're going to continue to talk about this next time also, because this topic of divine origin of the Torah is a heavy, heavy topic which needs some more meat on the bones. So have a good Shabbos and a good weekend. Not sure if we're going to start again on Monday or Tuesday due to the holiday, but in either case, have a great holiday as well. All the best, and we'll be in touch.